And we're back. I got the rear end all buttoned back up this morning and all the oil put back in it, so this should all be good to go back here. No leaks, that's always a good sign. So now my project for the day is to tackle the front end, at least as much of it as I can. I'm going to be waiting on that spindle and pitman arm for probably a day or so. But yeah, been looking over it, trying to figure out exactly where I want to put my jack stands so that I can get the axle out from underneath it. And if you had the normal wide front, the wishbone would be back here, so you could put your jack stands here. But with this, actually, you got to put your jack stands clear back here, and that's a lot of damn weight hanging off the front, and I'm just not all about that. So I think what I'm going to do is put one under each corner of the front weight bracket, because that damn thing's plenty heavy, and we've picked the tractor up and moved it with that thing before. It's plenty heavy enough to support it. So, but anyway, first things first, get it jacked up, get the front tires off of it, get it sitting on some stands. The tie rods can stay on the center pitman, but we'll get them off of unhook them from the steering arms. And then hopefully, we had both knees out of this thing when we first got it because we narrowed the front end up a hole, I think one hole. Anyhow, we narrowed the front end up and we had the knees all the way out of both sides of it. And so we greased them when we put them back in. So hopefully get everything loose, and they might be lightly stuck, but hopefully they just pull out, because I don't want to have to take the whole front axle out in one piece because that's a lot of weight. So anyway, get it jacked up, get the tires off of it, get it sitting on jack stands, and go from there. Alright, so it's sitting on jack stands. I got the only thing the jack's doing right now is I got it underneath the axle to keep it from swinging back and forth on me. But next step is getting the tie rods unhooked, if that thing will cooperate with me. Come on, get out of there. There we go. Obviously, you don't want to hurt the threads, because we're going to reuse this tie rod end, because these tie rods are not brand new, obviously, because the tractor, they've been on there for a few years, but they're almost new. So you take the castle nut, you flip it over, put it on upside down, take a brass hammer and a sledgehammer, and you whack until it falls out. And that way, the nut doesn't get hurt, and the threads don't get hurt on the tie rod. Yeah, I don't know if you can... Come on, let go. I don't know how well you can see that, but that's how loose that pitman arm is. Pretty bad. So anyway, do the same thing on the other side. And then we'll get the knees out of the center axle. Now these U-bolts are new, but they are fine threads, so just to make sure nothing stupid happens and we don't gall the threads, we'll put a little slickum on there. Oh, well, I guess that one wasn't on there that far. Damn things spring open when you torque them, and then they don't want to come back out. Although going out is easier than putting them back in after they get like this. Ain't nothing wrong with it, it's just you torque them up and the way they go around the tube, they you can kind of see that they're a little further open on the outside there. And oh, well, that's handy. It's already loose. Just gotta get the pin out, and she should slide right out of there. Okay, got the cross pin out, so hopefully how about that? And it's probably gonna piss a lot of guys off that came out that easy, because normally these things are stuckered and shit. But when we did this the first time, right after we got it, because it was, I can't remember if we narrowed the whole tractor up or if they just had the front axle set out too far to match the tread width. Either way, we ended up narrowing the front axle up, and it took Dad and I 3 nights. I'd come home from school and Dad would get home from work, and we'd go down and start beating on this thing. And we ended up having to make a slide hammer. And then it just so happened one of Dad's small Enerpac cylinders, if we put the pin in the back hole, and he had to make I think he cut a piece of 1x1 flat stock, stuffed it in there behind the cylinder, and that put the port, or the hydraulic port in the cylinder, right in line with this front hole. So we stuffed that 10-ton Enerpac cylinder in there with the slide hammer, and it took 2 nights, no, 3 nights of Dad and I. Actually, it took us a night and a half by ourselves to get this side out. And then on the 3rd night, one of my friends came over, and the 3 of us worked on the other side after Dad and I had already started on it to get this front axle apart. It was stuck. It looked like it had been standing full of water at some point, which this tractor, near as we can tell, spent a lot of its life sitting outside. But yeah, it was not fun getting this front axle apart the first time. And then when we put it back together, it got greased to make sure that never had to happen again. But obviously, being painted, we didn't want to go heating on the front axle, which heating on an axle is not really a good idea to begin with. But we took the U-bolts out, I drove it around, we pushed, seems like we had a stump somewhere, and I went and I just bumped up against the stump with the U-bolt loose and the pin out to try to get the axle to roll. It wasn't doing nothing, so that's how we had to get it apart, was we made a big, I think it was a 20-pound slide hammer that got a hold of the knee right in line with the tube, so you were pulling straight out. And that 10-ton Enerpac cylinder inside the axle. And actually, we didn't have to use the Enerpac on both sides. Obviously, we couldn't get it in with the axle assembled. We got this. Did we get that side out first? Because I know this side was the worst side. I can't remember exactly how that worked. But I know we got one side out. I'm pretty sure we did that side first, actually. I bet we did. I think we did that side first, because I know we had to use the cylinder on this side. But yeah, it was needless to say, long story short, it was not fun getting it apart. Okay, now the axle, or the center axle itself, is held captive in between the rear trunnion and the front bolster. There's actually nothing holding the axle on this pin. The only thing holding it is the fact that it can't slide forward because it's held rearward by the front bolster. So what you got to do is you take those two bolts out of the front, and right here, take these two bolts out of the front. That's just a steel cap that is bigger than the trunnion. That way it can't slide backward. And you take these 4 bolts out of the rear axle mount, and you just slide it off and get it out of the way. And then you just slide the axle back and drop it down. And that's all there is to it. Okay. So it should, in theory, be balanced pretty darn well where I have the jack sitting. That being said, it still may or may not try to fall. So I'm not sure about this. It's one of them deals where it'd be nicer to have some hip. But we ain't got that right now because everybody's at work, so. Yeah, it feels pretty good. Alright, it's sitting there on its own, so just straight down with it. As long as we're not going to hit the pitman. Look at that. Perfect. Poor girl looks so sad. She's all running downhill and ain't got no axle left under her. Looks like a scraper tractor. Alright, so initial inspection. The rear pin looks perfect. It's got a little bit of wear in it, but it's still damn near round. So no worries there. The rear bushing is shot. The front pin shows a little bit of wear on top, but nothing terrible. And even if it was bad, you can't go welding on it because both these pins are hardened, and if you go welding on them, you're going to be driving through the field one day and it's going to shear off and you're going to have your nose in the dirt. So, but it's very minimal, so. At the rear bushing is in the axle, and then the front bushing is in the bolster. The front bushing shot, it's only half there. The bottom half, it's from there to there in that bottom horseshoe. But it appears just holding the new bushing up to it, it hasn't got into the bolster that bad. So hopefully we can just push the bushing in there and it'll be all right. That's cast, so you don't really want to go welding on it either. And even if you did, you'd have to pull it off, weld it up, bore it back to size, then put the grease hole back in it, because there comes a point where you got to say, you know what, it's a tractor. If it was a truck or something where you're driving down the highway at 80 miles an hour, yeah, you're going to want to fix it, but a new bushing will take care of most of it. So, anyway, I think we will start with the center tube, get the bushings in it, or get the bushings swapped out, get it back under the tractor, just so we don't have parts scattered all over, and then we'll start working on the knees. So, we'll start here up front. Hopefully, this thing's going to be kind of fun to get out, if it's stuck. Oh, nope, it's not stuck. Sometimes they is and sometimes they ain't. Yeah, that's what's left of that bushing shell. Not a whole lot. So, the new one is actually, well, actually they both probably were at one point, but the new one's split. And it's got a grease hole in it, which you gotta line the grease hole up with the Zerk. Yeah, it's right there at the top. It's a little egged out, but it's one of them deals. It's a tractor. That's not really gonna hurt nothing. It's gonna be 10 times better than what it was with that new bushing in there. But what I think I'm gonna do to make sure it doesn't go anywhere is I'm gonna pull it back out and I'll clean that hole up really good. And we'll see if we got some bearing retaining compound or something to that effect to keep that bearing from spinning and losing that grease hole. Or bearing, bushing. Not a bearing, it's a bushing. Some of the stuff you find working on this thing, I tell you what. So this is the bushing they sent. Right part number, matches the picture in the book. Everything about this bushing is right. This is what belongs in this axle. This is the bushing that was in the axle. It's top hat bushing. Not even close to, I can't even find a picture in an older book. So that doesn't belong in here. And there's no serial number break for this axle, so it ain't like the early ones use that bushing and the late, no, they all use that bushing. And then the other thing it shows in the parts book is it's got the bushing and then a thrust washer back here. There was no thrust washer back here. And it does not show a thrust washer in the front, and there's a thrust washer up front, but that one won't fit back here because the ID's too big. So, this one does fit in the hole. It appears at some point, the way this is worn, that the bushing went bad, and that was their fix. Is somebody, because this isn't even a bronze or a oil light or anything. This is just a steel bushing. Like, there was no brass or bronze or nothing in it. I obviously had to split it to get it out because it was so tight in there. But yeah, and then you got like these pits and stuff that don't really, like, it was galling at some point, like it was metal on metal, which makes me think that at some point the bushing went bad and that was their fix. But this one does fit a little loose, so I'm gonna put some retaining compound on it and shove it in there, and we'll let it set up. And probably, I don't know what I'm gonna do about a flat washer. We might have one the right size. It doesn't, I mean, it doesn't give dimensions, and unfortunately I ain't got one to copy, but should just be able to put a regular flat washer in there and it'll work. But anyhow, yeah, get some retaining compound, or first clean the hole up, clean the bushing up, put some retaining compound on it, put it together, and go from there. The other thing I might do, just to make damn sure it stays, since that rear pin, there's no cap or nothing on it, is when I get it in, I might take a chisel and stake it. That way it can't go that way. There ain't nothing, it can't go this way because it can only go so far and then it runs into the rear axle support, but that way it could walk right out. So probably put it in with retaining compound, stake the back, and yeah, go from there. All right, I think we're ready to go back, or start going back together. I got that front bushing pre-greased just so that it's got something in there already. Luckily this thing balances nice right there under the tube. Come to me. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's real nice, Clark. Okay, so now get you over here where you can see. These bolts do not get lock washers because when you're driving, that axle is going to be pulling backwards on this plate. And if you put lock washers under these, it'd beat the shit out of them and they just expand and fall out from underneath the heads. So these bolts are cross drilled and these get lock wire when you get them tight. The hell was that? My phone's never made that sound before, but that was interesting. Anyhow, I don't really know if those are worth torquing. I think we'll just run them up tight. Actually, the easy thing to do, half-inch bolt. We'll put it on 2. That ought to be plenty tight, I'd think. So, like I say, those, I'll get everything back on the axle where it belongs and get it hanging there. I'll go get some wire and lock those down so they can't back out. They just had it in a circle. When you put lock wire on something like this, you're actually supposed to make a figure 8. So you'd come down through, come over, go through this one, cross over, come back up over top. Because if you just make a circle, they can back part way out, but if you make a figure 8, they can't. So remember that if you ever put lock wire on something, provided you have enough room. Sometimes, like inside of an injection pump or something, you don't have a whole lot of room and everything's close enough together, you can't figure 8 it, so you just do a circle. But on bigger stuff like this, where you got room, you want to make a figure 8. So put the back axle mount on and get her hanging there, and hopefully that should be good as far as the main axle housing goes. Just a quick shot here what I do with that locking wire. So if you make the figure 8, you got to pay attention to which way the bolts thread in and which way you want to route the wire. But when you do it right, now if that top bolt tries to back out, it's going to pull the wire taut and try to tighten the bottom bolt, and vice versa. If the bottom bolt tries to back out, it's going to pull the wire taut and try to tighten the top bolt. So, and if they both try to back out, they physically can't, because that one's going to try to go that way and that one's going to try to go that way, and they're going to pull the wire taut and they can't go nowhere. So, and when you do it, you want to make sure that you run your tie-off wire behind the wire that is connecting the 2 bolts. That way the wire can't flip around the front of the bolt or anything stupid like that. So that's that. Not gonna lie, when I was down there showing you that, the UPS driver walked in the door right at the end and he heard me talking to myself and he probably thought I was batshit crazy. You'll have that. Alright, so next thing, start working on the knees. Starting with the right side, because that's the one that I have all the parts for. The left side, I'm waiting on the spindle and the steering arm to get done being sandblasted. Well, first thing is got to get the lock washer pushed back, which is easier said than done. Well, it's itching 5/8, but Somebody's been on that damn thing with a pipe wrench. Anybody ever goes near a pipe or near a hex nut with a pipe wrench, smack the shit out of them. All they do is mess things up. So let me touch it up with a grinder so I can actually get on it with a socket. Okay, I got it good enough to get a socket on there. Now, if I turn the impact up. Come on, get out of there. Now, the fun part is going to be knocking the spindle out of the arm. So, let me set up something a little different here. Okay. I got her standing upright so the gravity's working in our favor. Hopefully it cooperates. The other side will come right apart, just loose as a goose, but... And this is the way you want it. Not coming apart, except for when you want it to come apart. Well, well, well. Yeah. This might require a bigger persuader. Okay. Let's see what we can do here. I don't want to get too crazy because I don't want to fuck the end of that spindle up. Well, that's, yeah. As much as I don't want to, might have to give that a little bit of love with a torch. Just a little bit. You don't want to go a lot. So I just had to, I didn't even have to use a lot of heat. I just got basically enough heat on that steering arm to burn the paint off. So now that thing's got to get blasted so I can repaint it. But got a little bit of heat to it. Smacked it a couple times. It still didn't move. So I came out here on the end, gave it a good whack. And it dropped a little bit. And then I pounded it out far enough to get on it with a 3-jaw. And then just pulled it off with a puller. So pretty painless. But now, got to get that bushing out of there. Get the hub off the spindle. Press a new seal cup on it. Repack the bearings. Put a new seal in the hub. Obviously make sure everything's clean. Then the spindle can go back together. And unfortunately, I can't put the damn thing back together because I got to get that arm blasted now. So, we'll go as far as we can anyhow. Hell, I got that bushing replaced. The thrust washer had a damn burr raked up right here. It wouldn't let the old one come out, so the old one had to come out in pieces. And then the old one pressed in, and it didn't fit terrible, but I still wanted to be sure, so 609 retaining compound. If it ever has to come out again, you'll have to break it out in pieces, but it'll probably never have to come out again in my lifetime, so, or anybody's lifetime for that matter, because by the time that bushing wears out, we won't be able to buy the diesel to run it. We'll be all green running on electricity. So anyway, the knee is technically done. There is an upper bushing that somehow I missed in the parts diagram. I do not recall seeing it call out an upper bushing. I kind of want to go back and double check to see if it does, but regardless, that one is not actually wore that bad, so I ain't really concerned with replacing it. The bottom one's the one that takes all the shock load, because it's the one that's the spindle's hitting against every time you hit something, and the bottom one was definitely worn. It probably had, I don't know, it was probably 30 or 40 thou smaller on the ID than the new one was. It was pretty thin. But anyway, yeah, on to the spindle. Well, I got the spindle apart, or spindle and hub, I should say. Bearing races look good. I already knocked the old seal out of the back of it before I cleaned it. Bearings look good. They ought to be. We repacked them when we got it. Yeah. Everything on the spindle looks alright. It is a little worn right up here on top. It looks worse on camera than it is. It's really not that bad. So I think what I'm going to do, since I can't put it back together anyway because I got to get that blasted, is I'm going to take this over to Tyler with the other one. And I'll have him do the same thing, have him blast the bottom of the knee and blast the splines and everything up here. And just make both sides the same. Now I did, to make sure nothing gets mixed up, take a setter punch and put a pin prick right there and put a pin prick right there, so that when they go back together, I know what pieces go where. Because when I get them back, they're all going to be a nice shade of sandblasted gray. Actually, yeah. So I guess I can go ahead and get that one tore apart and get the new bushing in it, get everything cleaned up like this side, and hopefully get that stuff blasted tonight. Because I got to go over there anyhow. He's bringing a tractor home tonight. Mr. John Deere himself bought a 1650 gas while I was going to go over there with him. But, yeah. So, probably no more assembly happening today. Like I say, I'm just going to get that one apart, get the bushing put in the bottom of it, get the hub apart, get it cleaned up. Luckily, I ain't got to screw with cleaning the spindle or anything up on that because they're both junk. So, well, I know the steering arm is junk. I'm probably just going to scrap the spindle. I don't know. Do you keep the spindle in the hopes that maybe one day you fix it and throw it on the shelf for raw shit, or you just scrap it because it's junk? I don't know. I got to think on that. But anyway, I guess since I'm not going to put anything together today, we will cut this video off here because I think this is already the 21st segment of it. So, getting a little long. But anyway, I guess that's it for this one, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.